Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes. If you're looking for Ukraine war news, this is the right place. I do these daily briefs every day. Please consider subscribing. We'll start here with 1,280 Russians off the battlefield. Again, this has stayed high now for about 2 months, maybe a little longer. It's been up into the 11, 12, 1,300 Russian casualties daily for the last, wow, I don't know, since May 10th or so. Tanks, 16 tanks off the battlefield. Again, replacement value is 4 per day, so that's a good day. 17 armored combat vehicles, 57 artillery pieces, and 63 vehicles and fuel tanks. So that's where we are today. It's still pretty hot. Today was also Anti-Aircraft Missile Troops Day, and wow, I mean, you wouldn't have thought about how important these guys were before this war, but you're pretty grateful for them now. Thank you for your professionalism and for protecting peaceful cities. Thousands of enemy missiles and drones destroyed, millions of innocent lives saved, and I think that's a very fair statement. This morning, Ukraine's air defense shot down 11 Russian targets. The Air Force said one Iskander K-4. So it's showing what's going on with this, but a couple of missiles got through, and that's unfortunate. And what happens when they get through is this. In the morning, the Russians shelled Dnipro with Shaheeds and missiles. Air defense worked in the city. A shopping center was damaged. It's reported that there are already 3 dead and 18 wounded. This is in Dnipro. Young people were running out, screaming, "I don't want to die." A witness of a Russian strike in Dnipro said, so far, 4 people reported dead. It's the same scenario, just slightly different statistics. 34 injured a little bit later. Russians are already blowing up things in Western Europe, and since the West refuses to address it all, it'll expand until Russians are doing in Western Europe exactly as they're doing in Dnipro. And here's a picture, just a still picture of the smoke after the strike. Okay, U.S. lawmakers are calling for the removal of all restrictions on Ukraine's use of long-range American missiles against Russian military targets, citing the need for a more robust defense strategy. But nothing's happened yet. Nothing has changed. Like we know that there are airfields just 200 kilometers over the border from Ukraine, and the Russians know it, and the Russians also know that the U.S. will not allow Ukraine to use their missiles to strike, so they're just sitting there. Now, the Ukrainians can use their drones, but that's not the same as using American-made missiles that can really do some significant damage. Meanwhile, Russia shot down a drone near Belgorod. The result was that it crashed into a location storing auto, fuel, and other flammable chemicals. Now, whether Russia shot that down or that was actually the target is hard to tell because the Russians generally come out and say, "We shot everything down, no one was hurt, nothing was damaged," and that's just kind of their initial script. Meanwhile, Ukrainian naval drones reportedly attacked Russian naval forces near Novorossiysk. The mayor has said Novorossiysk is a major commercial port that naval base where part of the Black Sea Fleet relocated after Crimean strikes. Now, I saw that the Russians were saying that here they released video showing that they destroyed or claiming that they destroyed these drones. You couldn't really see anything except for flashes. So we're yet to find out whether anything came of that. Okay. Russia missed an opportunity, a huge opportunity, to roll Ukraine over. Now, because of the delay in American aid from December to 6 months later, the Russians were able to really go on the offensive, but they squandered it, according to this analysis. Russia missed an opportunity to steamroll Ukraine and secure notable battlefield gains, former Australian Major General Mick Ryan said on Tuesday. Russia has built a strategic momentum with its assaults in Ukraine in the past 6 months. However, they have largely failed to exploit their opportunities, Ryan said. Russia appears to have blown what might have been its last chance to strike a decisive blow against Ukraine in this war. So we're going to be now faced with a war of attrition rather than some kind of huge blow. I think that's the way that things will push for the Russians in the time to come. The situation, he said, was probably Russia's best opportunity to make significant gains on the battlefield, which it could then turn into significantly increased political and diplomatic pressure on Ukraine for peace negotiations. Now, that leaves us to, now Ukraine has weapons, what's Ukraine going to do? The question now is whether Ukraine, which seeks to liberate more of its territory, can do better than Russia has later this year or in 2025. And that's really the million-dollar question. Now let's look at what those who support Ukraine are doing in America and Europe. The percentage of those supporting greater military assistance to Ukraine has grown in the US by a few percentage points. Almost a quarter of Americans believe that the United States does not provide enough military assistance to Ukraine, and this share has increased since November of last year. Approximately a quarter of interviewed Americans, 24%, believe that the United States does not provide enough assistance to Ukraine, compared to 18% back in November of 2023. However, even more Americans, 31%, believe that the United States provides too much assistance, and 25% believe that it provides enough assistance. The United States appears to be the only place in which there are significant ideological differences on this issue, with 51% of Americans who identify as right-wing believe that the U.S. provides too much support in Ukraine, compared to 13% who hold left-wing. I'd like to point out that if 51% of Americans who identify as right-wing believe that the U.S. provides too much, that leaves 49% who don't believe that way. And there's a significant chunk within that that would also say, hey, we're not doing enough. Now, let's turn our attention over to Europe. Europeans are skeptical Ukraine will win the war, some polling shows. While the majority of Ukrainians believe that Kyiv will prevail in its war with invading Russian forces, Europeans are more skeptical. This is according to a new study by the European Council on Foreign Relations. Europeans tend to believe that Ukraine won't defeat Russia on the battlefield, with roughly a third to half of those surveyed believing the war will end in a negotiated settlement, up to 31% in Greece seeing a Russian victory as most likely. Of the EU countries surveyed, only in Estonia was a Ukraine victory the prevailing view, and that's only at 38%. On the contrary, the majority of Ukrainians, 58%, remain confident their troops can win. Only 1% of Ukrainians believe Russia will win, while 30% see a negotiated settlement as the most likely outcome. There are considerable differences of opinion among EU countries, like they're not monolithic. Most Europeans still support being involved in the war in other ways, such as by providing technical assistance and by increasing the supply of weapons and ammunition. Only in Bulgaria, Greece, and Italy does the majority of the population, 63%, 54%, and 53% respectively, think increasing the supply of ammunition and weapons to Ukraine is a bad idea. That's Bulgaria, a neighbor, Greece, and Italy. Okay, so it's hard to continue when your allies don't think you can actually prevail. In other news, Ukraine received an International Monetary Fund tranche of $2.2 billion, according to Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal. This is part of the $16 billion extended fund facility program, so that's good news for Ukraine. The Americans announced a new military aid package for Ukraine valued at more than $2.3 billion. Our warriors will be strengthened with additional air defense, interceptors, anti-tank weapons, as well as ammunition for the Patriot and other defense systems. Thank you for supporting Ukraine in our fight for freedom. Together to victory. Meanwhile, Russia suspends participation in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. That might just be because the OSCE just strongly condemned Russia just a day or two ago. At its plenary session on Wednesday, 3 July, the Federation Council adopted a statement by the Russian Federal Assembly on the suspension of the participation of the Russian delegation in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE. The payment of contributions to its budget is also suspended. Now, with 546,000 casualties, Russia has started to recruit teenagers at 17 years old to restore unprecedented losses on the front lines in Ukraine. These teenagers at age 17 are being actively recruited to military enlistment offices to sign a contract upon reaching the age of majority. Now, recruiters recruit 17-year-olds to join at age 18 in the United States, but in this case, we know that manpower is severely limited and these guys will be going to the front line very shortly. daily. And it's not just guys going to the front line. Video allegedly shows Kremlin sending female prisoners to combat in Ukraine. Here's the article from the Kyiv Post. Footage circulating virally online of a Russian woman recruited from a civilian prison, now a soldier in the Kremlin's armed forces, shows her storming the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. And this is a fairly new phenomenon that Russia is pulling females into the battle. She was trained and had high quality ammunition, but she failed to escape from kamikaze drones, as did one of her comrades. Women prisoners are promised money and the opportunity to return home. In turn, the convicted women agree to such conditions because they are convinced by propaganda that they will return home alive. However, these are just dreams. As of today, prisoners in the Russian Federation sign contracts on a general basis. That is, the contract specifies a term of up to 5 years, but the contract is automatically extended until the end of the so-called combat service. On Sunday, June 30, some Telegram channels and mill bloggers published information that the first units, now remember, this is Telegram channels and mill bloggers. This isn't the same as AP or Reuters. But listen to what they're saying. First units of the so-called Storm Z, consisting of women mobilized from Russian prisons, were spotted in the combat zone. According to the report, Russian women penetrate near the rear zone and pose as locals. That's essentially like being spies. The women gained the trust of the Ukrainian service members by providing sexual services and learning important information about the units. At night, they can also simply kill an AFU soldier who stays with them for the night or who invites them into his home. So that's where Russians are in recruiting females from prisons. Okay, last thing, I talked about Project Konstantin yesterday. They were at about 35,000 pounds raised. They're now at 58,000 pounds. They had about 700, maybe 800 donations yesterday. The goal is 320,000 pounds. That's $400,000. If you do seek to donate to Project Konstantin, be sure to follow this link and this link only. This is the official link. I will put this down in the video below. I'll pin it below as well. I'll wipe out my own links and just put that. So please be sure that you're giving, that nobody is taking advantage of a horrible situation. All right, my friends, that's it. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.